Ciao, Colin. Ciao, Bambini. Welcome back to the main stage of Madame Lenormand's best friends race.
glad to be back as a lip second assassin.
We got 1 second in. That's not bad.
Hey, listen, that's 1 second too long, in my opinion.
Nice one. All right, and hello to everyone in the chat. How was your week? Catch us up. What's going on?
Great, very, very, very hot here in Scotland. And as if you've ever known a Scottish person, if you've ever been near one, they do not do well in the heat, even though all they do is complain about anything but heat. So that 2 weeks that we get when there's nice, gorgeous, beautiful weather, blue skies, it's idyllic. We're all sitting inside, just truly having existential crises. Like before we logged on, I was like, I am fully moving to Siberia. I can't do this anymore.
Hey, that's bear cut energy.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. There was a sort of sideways movement in the beer card, and I think it was just because I was like craving cold temperatures. Snow. How was your week?
Yeah, it was good. I was just thinking, your people have a strange relationship to the heat, right? Like, in happier days, you'd spend 2 weeks getting second-degree sunburns in southern Spain, and then spend the rest of the year in the more Scottish weather.
Can't wait to go back.
Yeah, it's yeah. We were saying before we hit record or went live that of the 2 times I got sunburnt in my time in the UK, one of them was in Scotland at Easter too. Like, that's not
creeps up on you.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, sitting in a window in a pub in Iona, and then I woke up the next day going, "What the hell? Am I Scottish now? Is this how you become Scottish?"
You walk across that little border, and bang, it's like iron brew and sunburn. That's all you've got to go. That's all you've got to go for.
Yeah. How was my week? My week was good. I had to do, because my goodness, the previous month had been quite the bacchanal in between my 29th birthday and last weekend.
Of course.
So I'm like, okay, it's time for the monthly fast. So that was quite good. You get a couple of days in and you sort of switch into this sort of permanent Ritalin mode where you have kind of like unlimited focus. And I put that to good use, putting like the UFOs, fairies, and Psychos together. And I'm like, yeah, sweet. And then I broke the fast last night for All Stars, and All Stars star card.
Oh, I see. It's all coming together.
Yeah. Well, we were kind of. Again, I think I found a pretty good song, which we'll of course get to. I'm happy with my song choice, but if there was kind of ever going to be a RuPaul song included, I thought this might have been one of the times for it, but I guess no. Awesome. All right.
Not today.
Yeah.
Satan,
not today, Satan. All right. So we should see. Other than the bear card, what else have you been working on?
So this week was I ended up spending a lot of time on the house card.
Mm-hmm.
Just it's not there yet, but
let's have a look, because in this house we stand house cards. So talk us through where
this for me is. It's moving as slowly as constructing a fucking house. So it's like
it's so good.
I'm happy, but I know exactly what I want it to look like, and I know exactly the final, like there's a light effect and a flare. I know exactly what it's going to look like. It just it takes time.
It's good though. This every time you send it back. That's really good. It's getting closer and closer to kind of not necessarily what I saw in my head, but what I saw in my heart. Like, this is the absolute energy of the house cat. And again, as you're talking about heat waves, like, the mountains by a river, by the Urubamba River, sounds like a pretty good place to be.
Yeah, again, I said this too, and I was like, I am manifesting a house with a pool, with air conditioning, with a pool boy. On that note, actually, do you think there should be like just a couple of people populating it somewhere before when we get to those kind of finishing touches? Or is it just good as is?
Say no.
Right.
Because I think it's easier to put yourself Like the Rivendell energy of this card is the energy of kind of like arriving at Rivendell and seeing that, you know, there's smoke coming from the chimney, which means someone's inside, like cooking. Like it's at the end of it, which isn't quite in the house card necessarily, but it's not there. Is that end of a long journey kind of thing. So, I mean, I'm prepared to be wrong about everything. But for me, I think without it, is my current thoughts. Certainly no pool boy, so it's going to look like Little St. James.
That was also one of my suggestions. The lawn isn't just going to be empty. That's kind of the last bit before I do the finished tone and shades and things and the lighting effect. But it is like it's pretty close. So probably next week that's going to be a done deal. On top of other things that we have coming up.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think it's really cool. All right, so let's talk about the bear card, because we had, and I don't know if Jason's in the chat this week, but this is another good example of how if you aren't in the Telegram group, girl, you're only getting half the story. Because there was some like late suggestions that certainly fed into the drafts. So before we talk people through the drafts, give us an entry or a little description of how it was. You know, tell us about your week with the bear. Phrasing.
So it was a pretty heady conversation, like talking about like what we were doing, all the ideas, but it wasn't daunting. It was like you were just giving me lots more information, lots of fodder, and just kind of I sent a few illustrations, a few sketches of like potential things we could do or things I was thinking of. And the one we've kind of landed on is it's not finished, it's not there yet, but it's kind of hitting all the nodes that we talked about.
So because we'll have a look at them. It's because here are the drafts, and the first one. It's funny because it's a question of, and I'm not sure you've quite nailed it yet when we get to the final card, but challenge of kind of. You don't want it to be too Captain Planet, right? You don't want the card to be environmental destruction, or more specifically, the consequences of environmental destruction. That's a really cool bear story and bear magic story. But the first one, I think Ghost Bear there's not enough bear, and there's kind of like too much environmental destruction as the main message. And then Jason came through after in the Telegram group after the last week's call with like, well, what about a bear rampaging inside some sort of mill or factory or whatever? And then he and I and whatever had some chats about like, well, it could be a summoning so that there's some sort of bear glyph, and we shared some of them so that the shamaness, which isn't a real word, but I just want to make sure that people like a female shaman is a shaman, but anyway, and so we kind of got to like a story that is a shamaness summoning a bear or participating in some way, because we weren't sure. We began with like shapeshifter, and so everyone, the consensus, I mean, talk us through this, but everyone most people landed on the card on the right as their preference, and that's kind of like one of the major inspirations. But talk us through what went on here.
I think the sort of the body language of the bear is like the seller on that one. Like that's the kind of that's as a strength and the composition. And I agree, it's not finished. It might not look like what we're about to show. Might not be what it looks like when it's finished. And I like the idea of like the indoors thing, but also wanted to get the elements of like the area we were discussing and kind of like a northern light hint and all this kind of stuff. Yes. But I did want that it was. You know, the bear was it was fucking things up, but like in a good kind of way, or the good for the bear.
I think because we'll show where you're at now, but I think if you look at where we're at now, you know, I'll just jump backwards and forwards as we're doing this. But so obviously, because it's a sketch, the fact that that's a big ass tire is evident, more evident there than it is here, because this isn't done, right? Like this is just like where I'm at.
No.
And the only other thing, and I would say what is obvious in the draft here is that the industrial area is more prominent. This could be a bear and a ghost breaking into someone's backyard. and that was kind of more like, because where we're at, the energy of the bear in particular, the like the kind of the potency of it is excellent. I think that's really cool. But like, it's more like when I look at this, I would say make the industrial stuff bigger and probably on fire. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. That would be very cool because it would provide an extra dramatic source of lighting other than just like the night sky and all that kind of stuff. The brick wall stuff was kind of a last minute. So now that you say it as a backyard, this is, like Always Sunny in Philadelphia. This is the bear breaking into like the McPoyle's back garden. Like
exactly.
That's 100%.
I mean, it's funny. Like, I don't want to be classist about it. Maybe I do, because like I do in fact have a giant ghetto tire in backfield that we've had there since we bought the place that we haven't moved. Yeah. So like, maybe fancy people have ghetto backyards too.
That's a spirit of place, actually. I did really enjoy the bear glass thing, so I tried to like do it as like spray paint in the snow. That might change into something else, but I liked the suggestion. So good job to Kai on that one. That was cool. But yeah, Factory on Fire is like, I'm well into that. The ghost thing
is that just because this is where you got to? Because I thought this is
where I got
choice.
to, but also I was kind of trying to start to play with like the shape shifting thing, like. They're kind of melding into each other, so it might end up being like, or it could end up being like there's maybe a drift of snow in the way that kind of just fades her out, the shaman, just fades her kind of like so that she's not the focus. Like I was just trying to not make it like too superhero of a cover, like too kind of dynamic, like that way.
Yeah. We could turn her back into a human. She could be like, she still could be a human companion by the end of it. Because I like the sort of, especially if it is. So what's good about it being a ghost here is that it's almost like when you read in, not that I do, of course, but when you read in like the Sun or the Daily Mail, someone snapping a picture of a ghost in like the window of a pub. It's kind of like that, but it's just like a trick of the light showing something that looks like a face. I don't know which direction I want to go in, right? And maybe it's a question for the chat where it's like, well, maybe we have is that a person or is that like a weird trick of the light?
Glamour. Well, we can take, so I think take the wall away to some extent, and make it more evident that it's an industrial estate, that make that thing in the background more kind of impactful, set on fire. And I like the idea of a snowdrift, so I'll play with that, get that done. And shout out to Mike Mignola, because this was a style inspiration, because he draws like mythical or folkloric animals, and he does it in a certain style where they have these big circle like eyes that have nothing, just black and white space.
Yeah, I see that.
And it always for years and years, that's always struck me as like extremely cool, and it kind of highlights that it's not just a bear. It's like, it's an other than bear or whatever. But yeah, I'm on board all of that. It's definitely it's in process.
And if the pub ghost shapeshift doesn't work, there's something like no, but seriously, like if that's a chain link fence, maybe rather than a
right.
But also,
if
she's just if it's a
so the bear, so that's so
like just walking beside
like,
it. Do you know what I mean? Because it's funny the way the snow ghost is at the moment. It's almost like if you adjusted the posture of the bear, she could actually be having her hand on like the right foreleg of the bear in like a really friendly, but that would kind of complete the story of cool. Like I'm summoning the bear. And it might actually, because Jason said it might be a bit too feral demon bear in the chat at the moment. And I'm like, I get what he's saying, because it's supposed to be a motherhood thing, but actually if we turn it out, if we switch from the snow ghost to an actual woman with her hand on the bear's foreleg, coming through a chain link fence or whatever, then it actually does soften it. It actually makes it like that is a mother's vengeance, because especially if she's not roaring at the sky like the bear is, then there's a real
It's leadership.
tension's the wrong word there, but an extra nuance that kind of tones it back down.
That's cool. So where the paw is, that could be like where the bear's just like completely destroyed, like completely flattening like the chain link. I like the idea of the fence.
Yeah,
that's where like it's getting warped. It's getting like pressed
exactly.
down. That's
exactly.
cool. No, I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, much to consider there. And I think I don't know. So there was chat about kind of making the actual bear look more kind of shamanic or mystical or what have you. Do we want to do that? Do we want to kind of add like some?
I think it'll be obvious,
or just like work with what we have.
Yeah. Like I think it'll be obvious. Obviously, now the front foreleg is going to be kind of on the ground because it's going to be pushing a chain link fence down, and probably we will have an actual human shaman walking beside the bear. I think that's the right. Without it turning into some of the images we looked at on Cuntboard last week that were quite, a bear with like a bare bone necklace and a headdress.
Like cute, gorgeous, but like World of Warcraft.
Exactly.
Kind of beautiful kind of way. And the reference for the ghost, the Sunday Post ghost or whatever, Sunday Post ghost. Was it in fact? It ended up being Frances McDormand. I used and not that anyone will ever be able to tell, but like I did squeeze that little working class diva in there somewhere.
Well, everything else, like I think once we put some red in and make the factory in the back bigger, because I was a bit, especially as we're about to talk about the stars card, I'm like, is this too night sky? It was the same problem with the. But I don't think it is. I think once we complete the story of the bear and the shaman and the chain link fence, and there's like a bigger factory, kind of like in the draft, or mill or whatever in the background burning, I think it'll work because this kind of stuff does happen at night, right? And it's funny to say this, like, because we're talking about shamanism and fortune telling and so on. Like, yes, at this point of the year, the bear should be hibernating, but you know what? It's a magic bear.
And magic bears do what they want.
That's correct. I mean, look at it. Of course she's doing what she wants.
Who's going to tell her otherwise?
Certainly not us. All right.
Cool.
Yeah, very exciting stuff. The stars or star, and it doesn't really matter which one. I do tend to like the stars better to differentiate it from the star card in tarot, which is kind of pointless in a way, because much of the meaning is the same. Much of the meaning around the star card between the two decks is the same, because we have had, this is why I wrote that book, Starships, we've had and been in relation with Sky Country one way or the other. This is the Sky Country card for hundreds of millennia, right? So what I bring to the stars card in my reading from tarot, which isn't necessarily there in, not that there's any such thing, reference Camellia, the traditional associations of the star or stars in Lenormand, is commencement of a journey, because the stars are a herald and that. So it is hope and destiny and all those kind of like good stuff, but it is also guidance and the beginning of a journey. So the tarot deck I cut my teeth on as a 13-year-old 15 years ago was a Arthurian tarot, and the star card in that was basically was a fire drake, Merlin using that as a sign that Arthur had been born in Tintagel. So that kind of really worked as a idea that it's a herald or it's a beginning or guidance or so on. So that's one of the energies I want to bring to the stars card, is the not just the guidance, but the fact that we've been doing this. We have been guided by the star nations since forever. Like, that's basically where this whole fucking story started, including, and if you're a premium member, like, I have a talk that I gave a couple of years ago called What If We're the Aliens? And we'll be talking about it in this course as well. As far as anyone can tell, the best, literally, and I think it's correct, but like life began off planet and was brought here by a squishy rock or by, who knows, flying saucers, whatever you want, right? But it doesn't need to be flying saucers. It can just be like a rock with microbial life in it. So the stars are home and where we go, and consequently that deep relationship is the source of its guidance. For the Ananu and other Aboriginal nations, the stars are the campfires of the ancestors. So, and you really feel that when you're out in the desert. You really feel that because they're so close and there's nothing else, and you're by a fire and there are fires that are just there, and you're absolutely in like relation with sky country in those moments. So that's the kind of feel that we'll bring to. I've got more to say about it once we've attempted our switch to cunt board. Before we do, let me get that one ready. But anything else you want to add before we hit up cunt board? What is the star or stars to you, Colin?
Well, I was like, again, I'm always like, well, it's by this point, I know well enough that it's not just going to be like a star with like a little, couple of things hanging out of it or whatever. It's going to be like an interesting kind of a suggestion of an interesting composition. But that's cool. Like so I wouldn't say too much, but the images that you sent to me, the inspo, I like that kind of ancient civilization aspect, like kind of like a tale as old as time and all that. Like that's cool. Like it's an extra volume to think about the card with.
So we've got two options because I've just jumped over to Conboard. Now, Nathan said it's got to be Seven Sisters. Interestingly, one of the options, and I'll explain in a minute, was Uluru with the night sky above. And that's Ananu Sky Country. And I'm like, I've been out in Ananu Sky Country and I am Australian and whatever. So I can make a case for it, but I still don't know if that's... Let me put it this way. The night sky over Uluru is absolutely in the stars card, whether we depict it or not. And whether we depict it or not is a separate discussion. So instead... They don't necessarily want that, or like it's kind of a taboo thing? Like, frankly, it is because
I refer to it as a sassy monolith, but I'm not as versed.
No, it's more that
you are, so
we have our own sky legends and sky language and sky ancestors and way of being with that material to draw on. And whilst this is absolutely a global deck and whatever, it's sort of on that edge of this is not appropriate for us to tell. We can say that story is in it, but I don't think we are the right people to center Ananu Sky Country. But the taboo thing is actually in play, because there are things you are and aren't allowed to depict, because Aboriginal Australia is much cleverer when it comes to the understanding of the power of images. And especially when it's a night sky and it's a campfire of the ancestors, what you are in a technical way doing is depicting the deceased, which you're not allowed to do. So I sat with it because that is absolutely the energy of the card. It doesn't matter if you go back far enough, and this is sort of what I mean by having two options. Obviously it's Göbekli Tepe, right? Like as the first option. So let's just get this, and I'll give you this information later. Colin, but like enclosure D, which is this one, is the one we're talking about. And it's not Göbekli Tepe now. It's Göbekli Tepe when enclosure D was at the top of the hill and functional. So I see it, and that's kind of why we'll attempt to go backwards. This is Göbekli Tepe from a distance, and the word actually means pot-bellied hill, which is rude, frankly, but nevertheless, that's what it's called. So you'll notice that there's just like a hill and really flat landscape. Oh, hang on. There you go, cunt board. Not using back correctly. This is the view from it, and let me just let it load.
Oh, nice.
The point of having this is to show that there's nothing. Like it's like, what is that? Southeast Turkey, but it's just plains. And a couple of little hills. Karahan Tepe is nearby, but nearby is like 15 miles. So what I'm sort of envisioning as a first go round of this, and actually I'll jump back to Maine so we know what we're talking about, is like a drone shot. So it's you will see. So enclosure D is 12 surrounding T-shaped pillars, and in the middle, two larger T-shaped pillars, and they're facing basically southeast. They're facing the rising of Orion and Sirius, sort of as they move up through the sky. So that's kind of, it'll be like a drone shot heading south, so that you'll be able to see like the T pillars and the T pillars and fires and maybe little people and whatever, and a big ass night sky. And
Right.
and behind it, and that's why I have this one. And that's why I got these. This is unfortunately from like Andy Collins thinks, and he's wrong, that it's a north facing, because he's obsessed with like Cygnus, right? But actually, if you look at this, you can kind of see. Oh, hang on, no, I've got to switch back to cunt board. Give me a second. Right, so here, and you'll be able to see this when you actually go to the Pinterest board. You've got Orion basically rising to the south, and this is sort of enclosure D. But what is happening is it's pointing, enclosure D, and this is in starships, was built around the time that Sirius started rising above the horizon again, having been gone for a few thousand years because of the precession of, because of the Earth's wobble, basically, just to keep it less boring. But so this is the night sky at the time when it was active, more or less. It doesn't have to be astronomically active, but it would be pleasant to have the main stars of Orion. And I leave it up to you whether, because it's not quite in the stars card, but it's not, to have like a hint of its outline, maybe not, but it definitely have the belt stars, because that's the kind of tie forward to Giza, but definitely have the belt stars kind of visible. Belt stars, Sirius, and otherwise like a really quite dramatic, really fun bright night sky, because it is the stars card, right? So that's where yeah. Now, if it doesn't work, and I think it will, because Göbekli Tepe is at the right point of it being the antiquity I spoke of. This is coming back to the additional levels of meaning. And it's also star beings. So like Klaus Schmidt, who discovered the site, called it a gathering of heavenly beings, because the way these stones, they're amazing, but the way these stones are put together is they look like they have just gently dropped from the heavens, and they're almost just like slightly resting on the ground, and they're resonant. So if you slap them, they'll kind of like tuning fork with each other, particularly the two in the middle. So it's this combination of like sound, which would mean dancing and drumming and intoxicants and fire and night sky, and all of that to come into relation or communion with beings that are patently star beings, right? So that's the guidance part of the card. And also when we get to the inset, that sort of coming into relation or coming into communion is there. Now, if it all doesn't work, or if it's sort of like this is not the energy we're going, my backup thought is to go back 100,000 years before Göbekli Tepe and basically have it as like African savannah campfire at night kind of stuff, right? Because that's where this shit began. So that we can kind of go in two directions. And both of those are kind of more invitational than using like an Anunyu one. But I think the Göbekli Tepe one will work. But if it doesn't, the backup is sometime in the last 500,000 years, campfires down here, campfires up there. And it's that same idea of guidance. And the reason I put it that way, when we get to the inset, which is the Six of Hearts. Now, the Six of Hearts is a broadly good card. It's a love card, Six of Hearts, but it's either like two things. It can be the beginnings of a new relationship. So it can be a Cupid card if you are kind of elevating a romance with someone you already know. So if someone who you'd previously been friends with, you enter a romantic relationship with. But more importantly, it's like a communal love and not in a sexy phrasing way, in experiencing the universe as love, or being held, or like family and ancestral stuff. So I think that's what I mean by Göbekli Tepe is kind of there in the inset anyway, because that is coming into communion with each other. So you're there in ritual celebration, dancing, drumming, etc., but also coming into communion in like a wider family sense of it being the cosmos. So that's the Six of Hearts, and I think how it relates to it. But with Orion, I'm getting Headless Rights vibe. Look, it's It's a Gordon White production. It's got to be in there somewhere.
The Goblinki. I like that all that stuff. The challenge will be placing these things with the inset, because obviously it's going to be the sky and then the inset's bang in the middle. So that, but you're offering a kind of an alternative. But I think we can figure something out. Also, so would we be open to, for example, like Orion's belt, right? If the chosen kind of stars are maybe in front of the inset, and then the star, like, as just like
Would
a,
be?
you know,
I
like
actually-
as like a traditional kind of, as a like a scientific diagram of it, of the stars, or, you know, like where it's all like the dots are connected and all that, just so, like, kind of to make the space work, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
potentially.
I'm open to it. Well, I actually think you'll have room to the right of the inset,
Right.
to have the three of them there, particularly if there's lots of stars in it, because it's actually quite a compressed
Ski
asterism. When we view it, it's actually quite small. Orion is big, but it's just sort of more important to get the belt stars because that maps it to Giza. One other thing I neglected to mention is there shouldn't be a moon on the card, because we do in fact have a moon card. Right? So
upcoming.
yeah. So Nathan's got Sirius centered, rising right on the horizon would be perfect. Yes. And if we did that, that actually puts, although it wouldn't be centered, it would sort of be to the left of center, but yes. And if we did that, that would actually put the belt stars more or less, sort of, okay, pretend you're high on Göbekli Tepe. So it's not quite correct. It'd actually be off the card, but it's close enough to put the belt stars in the top right. That's, yeah. And again, like, I think they should be a little bit brighter, but we will know. And it'll be in the book, of course. We will know that that's Sirius and that's there. But the whole kind of idea, and it's the idea in Starships, is the stars, is Sky Country itself, rather than getting into the itsy bitsy of like, oh, we're from the Pleiades or whatever. Like, it's not that exactly. And funny enough, if we do the 200,000 year ago, I would do the Pleiades instead, rather than this. But if it's Göbekli Tepe, it is Isis and Osiris. It's the belt stars and Sirius. But otherwise, it would be the Pleiades, because that's Matariki. That's actually like that and the Southern Cross are the core constellations of my shamanic lineage, and it's kind of like the beginning of the astro year. And so it's sort of like if we went down the African Savannah route, that moment would be the kind of announcing of the journey out of Africa and like the whole project, because that's the commencement of a journey based on signs is there in like the stars card. So that's the backup. But if it, like, Göbekli Tepe is better because it has the inset energy of communion.
Yeah,
which is
I like that. I like the structure of it, and I like the kind of the archaeology of it as well. So that's like a cool. It's visually interesting, or it can be visually interesting. So I think that's a good call. Yeah. So we'll work with that. We'll play around with it.
Yeah, if it was the campfire one, there's a page in the Invisibles. They're in Egypt, but they're talking about the stars and they're sitting around a campfire. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually why it seemed too obvious to go with the pyramids. And also that's just in general, but I would like, it's basically just using the Invisibles at that point. And we should be subtle in our Invisibles references like we were with the Clouds card.
Grant Morrison's Fortune's Fool's Fortunes. You'll do the reverse one.
Well, we haven't got to the gentleman card yet, so let's just blatantly just have a picture of Grant Morrison. It won't be. But
as King Mob. Fuck it.
Yeah. God, and then send it to him, so it looks like, God, what creepy psychopath is stalking me now.
Well, just be a card for him. I'm sure he's used to that shit. Come on, he's from the comic book world after all.
Yeah, nice one. Anything else we want to say about? I've already done the inset. Anything else we want to say about the star or stars, or any thoughts?
No, that's cool. So should we decide on if it's star or stars and just like say this is what it is?
The stars. Yeah.
For when we name it, the stars. Cool. Yeah. Okay. No, that's awesome. That's
or just stars. You're right. Yeah.
stars.
Yeah.
Again, it's a fun thing to kind of delve into. You're obviously, the big head on this one. I'm excited, oddly excited. I get any of the cards that gives me like the opportunity to pretend to be like Lara Croft discovering something. Like I'm totally into it, like a secret or whatever. I'm down for that. So yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Golden. All right. So, song. What did you end up with?
Uh, well, so kind of just because I truly was. So a lot of the star songs that I like are either like Lucky Star type songs, like Khalees, who had one that was like Little Star, or that was really it. I hate Madonna's.
I was gonna say.
This will get my multiple cards taken away from me. But the earlier work of Madonna, I'm not so crazy on, because that was like her Minnie Mouse phase where they're like pitching her voice to make her sound like, a 12-year-old girl selling sex. Which, I mean, obviously there's bops in there, not a crazy fan. And I was, and then the other songs were like Wandering Star by Portishead, which is like about fallen angels and all that kind of weird biblical shit. Too dark, not quite the energy. Just last minute, I was like, Jamiroquai, Cosmic Girl.
There you go.
He's fucking the stars. Like, he is literally fucking some star girl. Like, that is literally the song. So that was kind of the vibe. That kind of goes with some other songs I've picked out. Because we're obviously, again, we are cultivating a set for a future party that's going to happen on some rooftop somewhere. So Jamiroquai, Cosmic Girl, because it's just cool.
Yeah.
What about you?
It's funny because we were talking about the difference between the vibe, and one of the ones that you were thinking of, it was the film clip that had the correct vibe, but not the song. Right?
Yes, yeah.
And so obviously I want to say Starships by Nicki Minaj because it'll presumably be played at
that's just your selection every week.
Exactly. And the reality is the film clip is on point. And I wrote actually a post years ago about how it's basically a play on the kind of like Ancient Aliens idea, and she sort of shows up at the beginning of it in a flying saucer and appears in as Venus in the sea foam, and this whole kind of like really cool Ancient Aliens connecting with the star stuff. And the song is, of course, a perennial banger, but
a classique.
Yeah, it's not the right energy for, like, again, it could be the garden card. Maybe I save it for that because the garden is
because it's like a party, right? It's like a it's a rave.
So
it's a garden rave.
So I went with Star Collector by Paloma Faith, which is from Stardust, right? So and I was thinking, like, we're basically the villains in that. Michelle Pfeiffer.
Well, yeah.
But,
she's always a good shout for anything. Is that I do enjoy Paloma as like an artiste. So that's a good one.
It's almost a bit too melancholic, which can be in the card, right? If it's in the guidance, like, so stars is guidance. Typically you need guidance at a melancholic moment. So it's sort of about, and it is implied that the guy she's singing about is maybe from space or from like some sort of other world. And he teaches her about the stars and collects stars and things. So there's this sort of ethereal, eerie match to it, which is funny because the card is actually going to have like drumming, and I think this is the slowest song choice I picked so far. But that was what there's some really good, like David Bowie's Black Star, just an amazing so that actually came up in the planetary discussions last quarter. So there's some really good ones that will go on the Fortune's Fools Spotify, but I think like officially I think Paloma Faith is where I'm landing.
We're good for her. And that's like Stardust obviously has that kind of, it doesn't really go into it, but obviously the whole plot point is that
is about
there are star people
and how you
just
can be
apparently just drop down every now and again.
Well,
to like guide a whole full storyline.
Yeah. So I mean it's just Neil Gaiman to some extent doing Princess Bride, but differently, it's also, and it almost landed on the, because we're doing the UFOs, fairies, and sci course with the members at the moment. It almost landed on the recommended films for fairy because they enter fairyland, right? And it's almost been all right because Neil Gaiman is kind of too twee, and he's like, he doesn't believe this stuff, so it's this sort of like cutesy. I find him very frustrating. Like American Gods as a book was excellent, and Sandman is mostly good and whatever. But so it wasn't quite there. Great film. Don't really necessarily know anything about fairy. It might come back at the end of the course, but the point I was getting to was I almost went in the direction of stars as beings and was going to reference Stardust consequently, because it's actually about being in relation with stars and how you are involved in the unfolding of fixed destiny. Like, it's quite subtle, because it's actually about kingship and who gets to be king and whatever. It's a classic fairy tale shit, but there's also the Builder's Roman of whatever the kid's name is, and the star and all the rest of it. So it's like there's stars card energy in that film. I would watch it tonight, but I watched it quite recently. Carry on.
The last episode, you suggested Tilda Swinton, and I can see where you're coming from as like the star card actress.
Yes.
So I can see where that kind of like formulates. That's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of those movies. Like, just watch it when it's in the pantheon of movies where you kind of have to watch it every year, just as out of respect. I feel like
there are evenings or afternoons. Like, it'll get to sort of 2 or 3 on like a Saturday afternoon, and I'm like, I'm in the mood for some sort of fairy tale escapism.
Oh yeah, it's a good romp, I suppose.
Yeah. So when it's like, I probably want to start lightly day drinking. All my chores are done, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna watch Stardust.
And obviously Pfeiffer did obviously steal my skin routine for the movie.
Yeah. Funnily enough, stars in a health reading, stars are skin or skin breakouts, which actually happened to me this week. So that's another way. Also, I've got my Prometheus call or Prometheus webinar in 2 hours. So that's another way the cards have been predictive. Frustratingly so in the case of my fucking skin.
just fuck a face mask on that, you'll be fine. Yeah. You're like, I'm sick of face masks, there must be something else. There's a whole there probably could be a whole episode just for skin routines in terms of weird shit that goes on extra, like outside of the person, but that's guys, fasting is great for you. Just it turns into crackhead, but sometimes you're going to get a little breakout. Don't worry about it.
Awesome. So anything else? So what are you going to be playing with? More of the bear card and the stars this week?
Bear Stars house. I've got a little taxidermy work to do on the fox, and then I think we're golden.
Nice.
So yeah. And we are going to start having a conversation about the insets, just like in terms of let's start we're kind of halfway through the deck now, almost nearly kind of.
Yeah.
So we'll have like a conversation about that, and maybe start rolling that out as a start getting the prototypes out there next week, true. So that we kind of know what we're working with.
Yeah.
But yeah,
nice one.
I'm just hoping that some polar ice caps melt or something, and I get some snow or something next week, because
be careful
next week.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Because like yesterday, this time last year was very, very cold, and yesterday was like double digits. Was warm inside. Went for a walk on the beach, obviously with a jacket. But I'm like, August is usually when we get our snow, and it's not even August yet. And I'm like, because we barely had a summer last year. I'm like, are they just going to switch it up? Are we did the UK just heat up the summer for us and going to hand it back? Like,
yeah. We are stealing everyone's summer. That's we're stealing the seasons. Like, that's the empire is back. We're doing everything. We're just going for on all aspects.
Nice one. Alrighty. Well, thanks everyone in the chat. Once again, some really good ideas, including Nate there talking about Madame Lenormand's skincare routine. We can put that in the back of the book.
I don't think anyone wants to know what her
kick-ass one. I bet there was like baby's blood and whatever. That.
Yeah. Like she was given she was giving that bloodbath woman, like she was giving her a run for her money.
Absolutely. Well, all right, guys. See you in the next one. Thanks very much.